Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm just going to give it a couple minutes. We've got a few folks that are still joining. All right, just to cover a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded. We will share out the recording after with all registrants, and it will also be available on our YouTube channel. There is a chat feature. Please use it liberally. Ask questions, share resources, connect with each other. There are a few of us from IEC on the call today and can jump in and connect that way. But overall, we're just really excited to have you here for our final Policy 101 session. You can go to the next slide, Francisco. My name is Chelsea Biggs. I'm the Chief of Staff at IEC, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Francisco, who is our Program Associate focused on climate. And Francisco, since joining us, has really focused on workforce, and so really excited to have him here to talk more about workforce hubs and CEJA and where we are and where we're going. You can go to the next slide. So just to give you a bit of a roadmap of what we're going to talk about today, I'm kicking us off with the About IEC section, and then I'll send it over to Francisco, and he'll go through the lay of the land around clean energy and workforce, an overview of our stakeholders and the goals. He'll talk through issues and solutions related to this work, and then we'll leave plenty of time at the end for Q&A. You can go to the next slide. So this is a lot of words that basically says IEC has been around since 1975. Our goal is really to build power for people in the environment. We're a membership organization that it's actually over 130 environmental organizations operating in Illinois. And we carry out our mission really as a way to create healthy environments across Illinois by collaborating, building power, and providing advocacy. You can go to the next slide. So at IEC, we focus on 6 issue areas, as you can see here on the slides. We've got sustainable agriculture and conservation. We've got clean energy and equitable transportation, clean water, and zero waste. As I'm sure you're thinking as you're looking at these and hearing me talk about them, a lot of these are intertwined, and some of them are solutions to problems for some of the issues in those areas. And so our team really focuses on all of those nuances to help us move this work forward for the environmental movement. Our approach to supporting this work is coalition building, education, legislator education, and policy advocacy. Essentially, we're bringing together the voices of the folks that are doing environmental work across Illinois by building those coalitions. We truly believe the way to get legislators to take action is for them to truly understand what it is that we're working on. And so educating them by taking them out in the field, showing them what's going on in their backyards is a huge piece of the puzzle that we found to be successful. And then during legislative session at the city level and the state level, we do policy advocacy. Can go on to the next slide. You can go on to the next one. Actually, I meant to take that one out. It's essentially saying the same things. So our affiliates, I mentioned we have more than 130 affiliate members. They vary in geographic scope, in size, and in scope, in issue scope. So as long as you are an organization that's doing good work for the environment, you can join IEC's membership and have a say in the work that we do. You can go to the next one. Benefits of affiliates. I'm going to talk about this really briefly in case there are any folks on the line that are not existing affiliates and might be interested in joining us. So each affiliate organization is matched with a member of our policy team to provide regular engagement and connect with them on a regular basis. We do this movement building, the advocacy, the lobbying, and the coalition building that I mentioned before. During state legislative session, we also do some pretty substantial bill tracking. So all of our members get regular email updates and weekly phone calls that go over what's happening in session. We seek feedback from our members, and we also provide them with updates. We have offices in both Chicago and Springfield that our affiliate members are welcome to join, to come hang out with us, to drop a bag, to rest, to host meetings and that kind of thing. We also have pretty substantial communication support, but what I think is the most important part of our membership is this last piece on informing our strategy and our policy agenda. So every summer we host a number of webinars for our affiliates that walk us through idea, through concept, through a solidified plan or strategy for how to move a bill forward. We then solidify across all 6 issue areas what our focus will be during the next legislative session, and then we present it to our members in our annual meeting and they vote to approve that. You can move forward. So you might be asking, why are we doing these one-on-ones or 101s? Essentially, it's a way to sort of break down barriers between issue areas and show people what's going on in other parts of the environmental movement. We work with a lot of folks in conservation who don't know as much about our energy work, or a lot of folks that work in our zero waste side, but don't know too much about our transportation work. And so by hosting these 101s, our goal is to provide a little more visibility into the work that we're doing in other issues. And what I think is so exciting about green workforce, although for this session, we're mostly talking about energy related work, the green workforce spans across all issue areas. And so although it wasn't one of those 6 issues that I highlighted earlier on, it mostly lives within energy, but is something that we see as transferable across all 6. So really excited to have you all here to talk about our workforce programs, and I'll turn it over to Francisco to dive in a little deeper on what we've been doing.
Yeah, thank you, Chelsea, for the introduction. So today we're really going to be exploring a lot of the work that we're doing at IEC, specifically on workforce and what it really looks like as we're transforming Illinois to be a climate-centered economy, really growing our clean energy sector within Illinois, as we're seeing increased investments from both the state and federal government, and ensuring that we're meeting our goals in all these different sectors, and ensuring that we're promoting production of renewable energy within the state of Illinois. And there's going to be a lot of information that we'll be diving into today. So if folks have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, or wait until the end for the questions and answer section as well. So yeah, just to give an idea of the lay of the land for energy in Illinois, we have a sort of mixed bag when it comes to where we get our power from. So 55% of our power really comes from our nuclear energy sector. We're a major nuclear energy producer within the United States. 16% comes from methane gas, around 15% comes from coal, and only 14% really comes from renewables. A lot of that has been done through wind, and only 1% of that is actually based on solar. And that's all according to the Illinois Power Agency's newly launched Clean Energy Dashboard, which has a lot of this information and really breaks down how our energy production is growing, how it's grown in the past, and some of the equity initiatives that have been focused on within the renewable energy sector, because we're trying to make sure that it's a resource that a lot of folks who have been historically disadvantaged have these newly accessible resources for cleaner renewable energy. We're also the 5th largest energy producer and consumer in the United States. But we have a lot of energy goals as well. We are trying to reach that zero emission standard by 2045 and really reach our goal of 100% clean energy by 2050. So we're really trying to knock out that 16% of methane gas and that 15% of coal, and trying to replace it all with renewable energies. So that really speaks to our need for modernization to support renewables and really meet the demand, and reduce our energy burdens overall within the state of Illinois. And so that's where our green workforce really comes in. We can't build and scale all these, large projects that we need in renewable energies, whether that's solar farms, community solar, wind farms, etc. There's all these new potentials for the state of Illinois to grow in renewable energy. And that's where we really need our workforce. So where we see our workforce right now, according to our numbers from 2022 and 2023, we've seen growth in the past. There was a 2.8 and 2.2% increase based on whether or not you're looking at traditional transmission distribution clean energy jobs or not. And really the difference between these two numbers is that uh, clean energy jobs with traditional and transmission distribution aspects to their work are sometimes associated with fossil fuels, but aren't always completely accurate in some of these numbers. And so we try to include both numbers and metrics to kind of showcase that we have a large base of a workforce, right? We have 130,000 jobs that in clean energy jobs that don't work with traditional and transmission distribution. And we're seeing a lot of growth in these numbers, and hopefully with programs like the the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, and funding from the Inflation Reduction Act, we'll see similar job percentages that exceed those of other states. And a lot of this work has really been made possible thanks to all of our stakeholders, thanks to the Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition that IAC is one of the founding members of. We really ensure that we're supporting our communities across Illinois and pursuing goals and accomplishing policy achievements that are benefiting historically disadvantaged communities in all parts of Illinois. Through the Jobs and Economic Justice Subcommittee, we really focus on the workforce aspects that come in with the clean energy sector, ensuring that CEJA is being successful on the ground, that these jobs are being, that these training programs are being accessible, by community members who, don't, aren't familiar with having these opportunities come to them, and ensuring that we're knocking down barriers wherever we can. And so we really work hard with a lot of our partners and the Department of Commerce and Economic Development or Opportunity, the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, and the Illinois Power Agency as well, alongside all of our unions and community-based organizations statewide who have deep connections with the communities and residents who live there. It's through all the partnerships that we've established and the network that we've helped build up since CEJA's enactment back in 2021 that really built that strong knitted community that we need to ensure success at all levels. And so, our goals are really to ensure that we're promoting environmental justice, promoting economic justice, and ensuring a just transition towards clean energy. We want to advocate for CEJA success and completion, and really just ensure that the programs that we've helped promote in the past are working to this day and continue to provide a sustainable future for all of us. And so, how do we get to these goals? Really, we need to continue investing in Illinois. Without investments being made, a lot of these programs sort of get lost and forgotten about in the past. So as long as we stay engaged with the implementation of these programs that were helped to pass in the state legislature, or even on the county levels as well, we need to ensure that we're staying engaged and ensuring that these programs continue to be invested in. And so with the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, there's a couple different workforce training programs that came out of it. The first one is the Clean Jobs Workforce Hub Network and Energy Transition Navigators programs. So these are 14 workforce hubs / navigators across the state, with the 2 Chicago locations being split into 4 hubs to cover the communities there. As you can see on the map, it kind of splits off. You can see exactly where these areas are being covered. And these are mainly run by community-based organizations or community colleges that really take up the work and utilize their spaces that they've built out to offer training programs in either solar, wind, HVAC installation, energy auditing, EV, infrastructure building, and ensuring that, we have a trained workforce in the state of Illinois, that jobs are kept within the state, and opportunities are built for residents who live here. And that's also where the Illinois Climate Works peer apprenticeship program also comes in. A lot of this work is done by a lot of our unions that we've built connections with, as we were, advocating for CEJA's passage. So these are 3 pre-apprenticeship opportunities covering northern, central, and southern Illinois, with 14 locations sort of split, covering all parts of the state of Illinois. And then we also want to ensure that, we're being equitable in how we're approaching these training programs, ensuring that no one's really left behind. And so we really have pushed for this returning residents clean jobs training program. This trains soon to be released people who are incarcerated for jobs in the solar and efficiency sectors. The 4 locations are in the Kewanee Life Skills Re-Entry Center, the Decatur Correctional Center, the Western Illinois Correctional Center, and the Vienna Correctional Center. And so where's CEJA now? As of October, we've seen around 10 of the 14 workforce training programs get awarded CEJA funding for the Clean Jobs Workforce Network program. For the Energy Transition Navigator program, we've seen 12 of those 14 program areas get funding. Returning residents, 2 of the 4 program areas are on the path to be awarded CEJA funding. And we are proud to announce the completion of the Climate Works Peer Apprenticeship Program. All those programs were awarded funding, and they are now really implementing a lot of this on the ground. And for all these training programs, a lot of them are starting literally yesterday. They started training folks in the Alton Hub, in the hub that's located in Decatur. They're starting their bridge programs, in which they're introducing folks to all these different pathways that are, being made available to them, the different types of certifications that they can be applicable for, and really connecting them with clean energy employers as well, to ensure that they have a job after completing their trainings. And also providing those barrier reduction services as well, to address any transportation barriers, childcare services, providing them with a stipend for the time that they're spending attending these trainings, and really just ensuring that, that they're, all barriers that could be potentially, stopping them from having a sustainable future in the clean energy sector are addressed. And so some of the barriers that we did face with CEJA's implementation specifically, was in the speed of implementation in the beginning. The DCO just didn't have the staff capacity to really administer the implementation of CEJA, create the curriculum that's necessary for folks to follow as they're applying CEJA on the ground. The application process for it as well took time for both the state and communities in Illinois to really understand a lot of the paperwork that goes behind it, the time invested, and what makes a good CEJA hub, what makes a good clean energy training program. A lot of this is new ground for a lot of us, and the state to really explore, as CEJA is one of the nation's leading pieces of legislation when it comes to addressing climate change and providing economic opportunities within the clean energy sector. So there's a lot of initial confusion that we faced as we were implementing CEJA in the beginning. We also faced a barrier with the Private Business and Vocational Schools Act of 2012. This resurfaced a certification process from the Illinois Board of Higher Education, which would have delayed CEJA by even further months of delays, and caused a lot of sort of backlash from communities who have been invested in this, and they don't want to see those delays sort of halting the progress that they've made. As they're applying for CEJA, and creating all these different relationships to ensure that they have a strong program for their communities. But we're proud to announce that IEC helped lead all of these efforts when it came to the wins and implementation. Working with the partners that we've established all across the state. As of mid 2023, DCO now had the staff capacity to implement CEJA. When it came to the application process, progress is still being made in every program since 2023, as we saw from some of those earlier numbers. The Illinois Clean Jobs Coalition still meets with the DCO and IPA on a monthly basis to provide any updates of concerns that we've heard from members in the communities all across the state of Illinois. and also to provide us some updates on how the programs are doing from their end and their perspectives and what support that they need to ensure that, they're administering CEJA to the best of their ability. And we also provided a legislative solution through one of our House bills in the last legislative session to address that Private Business and Vocational Schools Act of 2012. This exempted CEJA from that certification process and increased the original number of 13 workforce hubs and navigators to 14, with that new location being placed in Kankakee, Illinois. And so we still have two top issues that we're facing when it comes to creating a strong green workforce in the state of Illinois. Our first issue is really based and centered on environmental justice and ensuring a just transition. Our second issue is more so on the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act implementation within the state of Illinois. And so for this first issue, we really need to address fossil fuel reliance that the state still has. Illinois is still powered by a lot of non-renewables. We still have a lot coming from fossil fuels and only a small amount really coming from renewables. There's also this issue of transparency as well. There's a lack of reporting from fossil fuel companies and coal plants who have created gaps in sort of some of the information on how their energy workers are doing in these coal plants and what support CEJA could provide or the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity could provide for them to ensure that we are doing our best that we can to move towards renewable energy. There's also ensuring that there's opportunities for employment as energy workers in fossil fuels seek alternative employment as we move towards renewable energy. It's really vital that the DCO works with clean energy employers, CEJA hubs, and fossil fuel companies to provide resources for them, which we thankfully have seen, been done in the past. But there's still a greater need to address to ensure that these energy workers aren't left behind. And so some of the solutions that we are seeking to address for these issues is scaling up investments. We need to ensure that we're continuing to invest in the clean energy sector. We're continuing to invest in community solar, in residential solar, in utility scale solar developments as well, or in more additional wind farms to be developed as well, to really strengthen that clean energy infrastructure, to ensure that Illinois remains dependent on its own energy and reliant on its own workforce to provide that energy for them. There's also a need for stronger transparency and stronger reporting practices. We need to continue advocating to ensure that residents in Illinois have all the information on the developments that are going on within their state, to ensure that the laws that we passed in the past are being followed by all the companies that were mandated to follow these new reporting practices that CEJA implemented, to ensure that that if a coal plant is planning on shutting down, that they don't just fire all the workers the next day, but have that sort of time period of a couple months in advance, letting the government know, hey, we're going to shut down this coal plant, letting their workers know as well to give them time to transition to a new workforce or find new employment, and to give government time to address those disparities and address any economic concerns that are coming from those workers, and really need to ensure that there's opportunities for employment. CEJA created the Displaced Energy Workers Bill of Rights, which addressed a lot of these issues, and we need to ensure that we're continuing advocating for the implementation of this Bill of Rights, and also expanding the workforce training programs that we already have. If we really want to move towards our goals of 100% renewable energy by 2050 or 2040, we need to ensure that we have the workforce needed to build and scale those projects, that a lot of those jobs come from folks who live and reside in Illinois, and that we're not relying on outside states to sort of be a major driver in these workforce initiatives. And then we also have an issue when it comes to the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act implementation. The clean energy workforce development, there's still a strong need for a well-trained workforce to support the transition to a clean energy economy, but training programs and support systems are not yet fully operational or adequate. We also need to look at federal funding utilization as well within the state of Illinois. Illinois still needs to effectively use a lot of the federal funding that's coming from the Inflation Reduction Act to advance the clean energy projects and workforce development initiatives that CEJA has helped lay the foundation for, and ensuring that we're doing the best that we can to ensure that these opportunities are accessible to all communities that reside within the state of Illinois. Um, and so that's really where, CEJA helps with that clean energy workforce development. Siege is estimated to assist Illinois in creating around 100,000 clean energy jobs by 2045, according to the Energy Transition Workforce Commission. There's other similar reports that, estimate around 40, 50,000 jobs being created, 60,000, 70,000 jobs being created. A lot of the initial job creation will be in the construction phase and, really building up that infrastructure that we need to have a reliable clean energy powered economy. And then there's still going to be a need for maintenance and ensuring that, once these folks are trained, that they stay in Illinois to continue working on further projects, whether that's, residential solar or solar for, businesses as well. Really ensuring that we're making that just transition for our workforce. And Illinois needs more to stay on track. We need to ensure that there's adequate support to these workforce hubs, that we're expanding these programs and really supporting the barrier reduction programs that exist. The barrier reduction program addresses, as I said before, a lot of those gaps, whether it's, if someone has a child and they need to pay for childcare, this is where that funding comes in from CEJA. CEJA for program participants in these workforce hubs, they cover childcare, they cover transportation costs, they give you a stipend. If there's additional barriers that could be stopping you from attending these trainings, you would work with the hub, and the hub would help provide a lot of that initial funding and support to address any gaps. And then we also need to look back to the legislation and see if there's any gaps in the support where it's not being reached, ensuring that all these programs are being well funded, being well maintained. And if there's future gaps that we didn't account for, that we're coming back to it and really keeping it alive. And as I said before, we need to utilize that federal funding mechanism that we have through the Inflation Reduction Act. Thankfully, a lot of that funding is being put into action. The Climate Pollution Reduction Grant is a US EPA grant program under the Inflation Reduction Act that will use the CEJA workforce hubs as their foundation to build upon and expand into new training sectors. One of their initiatives is around a $16 million initiative to support clean buildings contractor training. This ensures that there's electrification contractors that are trained in each hub to ensure that, we're also electrifying a lot of our buildings, ensuring that, our buildings within the state of Illinois, whether that's for future construction projects or if we're, reinvesting in a lot of our old infrastructure that we have in the state, and renovating them, that, we're pushing towards that, 100%, clean power, zero emission buildings. And then there's another initiative when it comes to EV specifically. The Fleet and Freight Operator EV training is around a $4.6 million initiative set out under the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, which provides training for EV fleet operators, dispatchers, and drivers, and creates that vocational training and job creation for them to ensure that, these opportunities are going to disadvantaged and low-income communities. And I think I'll hand it off to Chelsea to help close us off before we go into our Q&A.
Great. Thank you so much, Francisco. Just a reminder, and some folks have started putting questions in the chat. Please feel free to throw those in there now as you're starting to think through what you've heard. And while you do that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about how individuals can join IEC membership. So we, in addition to being an organizational membership, we also have membership for anyone. It's a perfect way to support the work that we do. There's a financial contribution at different points during the year. You get things for that. So we recently had a drive with a puzzle. Last year we did t-shirts, but there's opportunities to engage with us that way. And it just ensures that you're on the front lines of information sharing, action alerts. You'll hear what's going on in session, out of session. You'll get, really quick updates on things like this, educational opportunities for the public. So always encourage folks to join IEC that way. You can go to the next slide, Francisco. Great. So as I mentioned, this is the last in a series of webinars on 101. So the recordings of each of these are available on our website, on our YouTube channel. So if you're curious to hear some of the work we're doing in these other issue areas, please check it out. We'll make sure that that link is shared with everyone in the follow-up to this meeting. You can go to the next slide. I'm going to open it up for questions. There's one question that there's a few folks asking about, so I want to do that one first, Francisco. So it's folks are curious about the hubs. Do they exist? Are they still being developed? How do folks find these opportunities? Can you give a little more information on those?
Yeah, definitely. I think to answer the first question, the first part of the question, do these hubs exist? Yes, they do. Um, what I think one of the numbers I mentioned earlier is around um 10 of the 14 hubs have received funding to be operational. There's three missing program areas that still don't have a finalized grantee to run those programs in their areas, and that would be the Decatur, Carbondale, and Peoria regions. Those are the three missing program areas that don't have an official grantee, nominated by the state of Illinois through their grant application process. There's still that fourth missing area, which is that Kankakee hub, but that probably won't be applicable for funding until early next year, because it's such a recent change made within the last legislative session. For folks to get updates, we've had conversations with the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and they're working closely with the Illinois Power Agency to really develop a website for folks to be able to access a lot of this information and developments as they sort of happen. Um, and sharing some of the success stories that are coming out of it as well. I know website development is something that's very recent and new. So they're hoping to transition from their regular Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity program status and updates page on CEJA, and really make it its own platform for folks to access that information. But as I mentioned before, there's the Alton Hub, which is training folks right now, around 21 people. And then there's the Decatur Hub as well, which is training around 19 folks. And so folks are getting trained right now as we speak.
That's great. It sort of answers the next question. Are there career opportunities available for the hubs at this moment? It sounds like there are for many of them, and soon this information will be easier to find and digest when the Illinois Power Agency, develops a hub for the hubs that highlight the opportunities available.
Yeah, definitely. And with the bridge program, I've heard all these bridge programs are sort of operated differently for each of the hubs. They take a different approach depending on what they think works best for the community members, and what they've outlined as they were applying to be a hub. Some of them are doing an 8-week bridge program where they do a sort of half day for each weekday from like a 9 to 1 p.m. And some of them even invite clean energy employers in their community to help meet the people that they're training, to kind of get them engaged and interested and ensuring that, you know, they're being connected directly to a clean energy employer so that way after they get trained and certified through these hubs, that they get that clean energy opportunity to start working on projects the next day after they finish their training. The Alton hub is somewhat similar as well. There's a lot of clean energy businesses that are working with the Alton location and ensuring that there is that pathway to employment, which is where the workforce hubs and energy transition navigators really play a vital role in ensuring that those connections are made.
That's great. So this next question, just sort of to zoom out and maybe like provide an example of a specific person. Maggie wrote, I'm curious about efforts to retrain people currently working in fossil fuels. What is a transition path for a people's gas worker, for example, who is open to retraining but would like to maintain a similar standard of living?
Yeah, so they could actually get trained in one of these hubs specifically. There's a piece in the legislation that outlines a preference in choosing folks from the community who are a displaced energy worker, right? So folks who worked in fossil fuels are finding themselves, close to out of a job, um and are seeking new employment. And are actually seeking even better employment with a lot of these clean energy jobs, providing even higher, um, you know, pay standards than other traditional fossil fuel jobs. So they could get trained in solar installation. They could get trained in sales specifically if that's something that they want to go to. There's different pathways within the clean energy sector, even within just solar itself, that folks can get trained in. So if they were selling gas to folks in their community, they can now sell, solar panel installations. They can sell, clean energy projects to folks in their community. So there's a lot of pathways, but a lot of it is really in these hubs that they would be connected to with the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and also the navigators themselves, sort of working in coordination with them.
That's great. So next question, who is running the Chicago hub?
Yeah, so for the Chicago hub, there's a couple people. Um, sorry, I know the Chicago Cook Workforce um, uh,
Partnership.
organization is doing some of it, but I can pull out some of the specific information on the organizations.
That's
Um,
great. Yeah, we can follow up with that too. I'll go to the next question, but happy we can, throw that in the chat in a little bit. Kathy asks, do you recommend a website or place to look for training/jobs? Is it your website, the state of Illinois' website, etc.?
for clean energy jobs specifically.
Mhm.
Yeah, so CEJA, I think, has a WorkNet program that they've been promoting to get folks signed up to get trained in some of these hubs. I know navigators themselves will sometimes do like direct outreach to community members as well. The Illinois Power Agency has an equity workforce portal as well where they connect clean energy workers, specifically equity eligible contractors, um, with clean energy employers specifically to get started on working on different projects that are going on within the state of Illinois. So that's one resource I would share with you. And yeah,
That's great. Um, if you're able to throw the link to that in the chat, Francisco, that would be helpful. And I'm going to go to our next question. Sorry to be throwing so many things at you at once. Um, and at the point about Illinois needing to stay on track to support workers transitioning through training programs, workforce hubs, etc., is there a list of policy demands that IEC, its partners, have to address those gaps and deficiencies?
sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah, that's I didn't read it very well. So and to the point about Illinois staying on track to support workers transitioning through training programs and workforce hubs, is there a list of policy demands that IEC and our partners would like to address, or gaps or deficiencies that we're looking to address related to workforce?
Yeah, so there's a recent, I think, gap that I was made aware of as I attended the Renewable Energy Conference last week in Bloomington, Illinois. There's one gap when it comes to the returning residence program and the barrier reduction program funding, where that funding isn't accessible to folks who are in the returning residence program, mainly because there's a lot of um, issues when it comes to ensuring that that funding is directed to the program participants within those programs, and also because of the nature um, of them being incarcerated and working with IDOC on ensuring that the funds are managed properly. Um, a lot of that concerns is mainly because if we're providing childcare services, the program participant is incarcerated, and so there's some sort of like legislative barriers there that exist. Folks who are within that program and don't complete their training while incarcerated will be transitioned to a hub, near where they're, once they're released, if they, were incarcerated somewhere in, southern Illinois, but they actually live and reside in northern Illinois, they would be connected to a northern Illinois workforce hub to complete that training, and they would get that access to the barrier reduction program funding. I think that's one of those gaps that we've sort of identified recently that, is one of those things that you become more aware of as it gets implemented and as you're continuing to have conversations with community-based organizations and the state, and ensuring that any concerns that we're seeing on the ground get addressed, in the future, so that we're constantly improving these programs.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's not necessarily a list of policy demands that we have right now, but we're still gathering a lot of information. A lot of this is fairly new to basically the country. And so we're really trying to ensure that we're, setting a good standard for other states to follow.
Yep. And I'd add too, we have a great relationship with DCEO, who's implementing a lot of this. So as challenges arise, like we know we have good partners on that side who want to work with us. So yeah, thank you, Leslie, for sharing DCEO's tracking doc for the program awards. I'm gonna run through a couple other questions here. What is the goal for the future? More nuclear, wind, or solar? All of the above. I think there's a coal mining in Southern Illinois. Is there a lot of activity still going on there? And so that's a great question, especially for our energy team. Francisco, feel free to answer it in, what you know from the workforce lens. But Ricardo, I would definitely recommend you connecting with our energy team, especially as we're planning our legislative work for next year.
Yeah, definitely. I think we're seeing a lot of, we're seeing some coal plants like shut down. I think the Jopa coal plant was one that recently shut down, and one of the energy workers there, their son received a scholarship through the Displaced Energy Workers Bill of Rights Act section that outlines a specific scholarship being awarded to folks who are the dependents of an energy worker who was displaced. Ensuring that we're again reaching sort of all levels of where could there be a barrier. Your child's education is a big thing to be worried and concerned about, especially if you find yourself working for a coal plant, and that coal plant is scheduled to shut down in the future. And so that's one success story, really covered by a lot of our partners in the Prairie Rivers Network, who do a lot of good work, in those regions to ensure that, folks are being covered and, that are being cared for in their communities. And so, yeah, I think that answers part of the question. When it comes to nuclear, and wind and solar developments, again, a lot of it's really ensuring that we're moving away from that natural gas, or that methane gas, and um, the coal sector, and ensuring that we're transitioning all of those portions, which is around like 30+% of our energy currently, and shifting that all towards renewables, in the solar and wind sector primarily.
Perfect. The next question I missed, I'm sorry. Are you finding that there are any significant differences between pay, benefits, and working conditions for those in fossil fuel industry versus renewable energy industry?
Yeah, a lot of the numbers that I've come across are specific to the solar industry, but they receive significantly better pay. For the average worker, working conditions tend to be a lot better, especially as efforts to ensure that we're creating a standard of living for folks and standard of working conditions for folks within the clean energy sector in Illinois, that promotes safety above all else, and really ensures that there's high quality pay as well and competitive pay for folks within the industry. I've seen numbers as high as like 100, something plus, every hour, to numbers, as low as 30, 40, $50 an hour. So that's sort of some of the rates that I'm seeing. It really depends, depending on whether or not you're an independent contractor, setting up your own business, and what rates you're charging for some of the projects that you're conducting, and whether or not you're sort of in a union or with another organization that's managing a lot of that for you.
Amazing. Well, without any other questions, oh, got another one. Oh, okay, we're talking about the prairie plant in the chat here. Um, and I don't know that I have too much to add to that. If there aren't any other questions, we can probably end the session now, but Francisco and I can certainly hang on in case other folks have questions, but we really appreciate you coming out today. Thank you so much. You know where to find us if you have any follow-ups.
Yeah, thank you all for coming.
I do want to clarify when you say hub, what do you exactly mean by that?
Yeah, definitely. So a workforce hub is essentially just means the location specifically where they're getting folks from the community in to train them in one aspect of clean energy. And so
Okay,
there's a whole curriculum stated out so they could be trained in solar, wind, EVs, etc. So that's just the location.
okay. Which one's the one for Chicago? I think you added the link for it,
Yeah,
right?
so Chicago has around two hubs indicated through the legislation, but are split into four separate locations. In Chicago specifically, for the Chicago region, the main managers of it is the Chicago Cook Workforce Partnership organization, and Safer Foundation, and also 548 Foundation. So those are sort of the four key partners.
All right, great, thank you. And the other one is in Waukegan, or is that somewhere else?
Yep. So there's around 14 locations. One of them is Waukegan.
Do you know the name of that one?
Yeah. So for the Waukegan, that's managed by the College of Lake County.
Okay,
Yeah.
great, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. No, no worries.
Great
This is a,
presentation.
thank you. Yeah. No, thank you for coming. This is a question from Tom.
Yeah, on those breakdown of energy in the Illinois, the 55% nuclear, et cetera.
Mhm.
I think you gave a source, but I couldn't write it down
Yeah.
fast enough where that came from.
Yeah. So that comes from the Illinois Power Agency's energy dashboard that they recently released. So this is a new sort of initiatives um, that they were able to release as a resource for folks to really get um, a lot of the specifics on how our renewable energy sector has grown over time and sort of where we're at now. And they're also going to be looking into a lot of equity initiatives as well to ensuring that where is energy being produced within the clean energy sector, and where do we need to go next to really meet our demands.
And did you say that was the Illinois Power Agency dashboard?
Yes, they have a clean energy dashboard.
Okay,
And I can link that in the chat as well, if that's useful.
okay. It's interesting, 55% of ours is coming from nuclear.
Yeah, we're a major nuclear producer, and I think that only comes from like a few plants that we have as well.
And just personally, I think nuclear is at least better than coal and methane, but that's a topic for another day, I guess. Anyway, thanks for the presentation.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Yeah, I saw one question in the chat from Kawami. What's the current rate of solar deployment in Illinois? I don't have a lot of those numbers, but I know that there's new studies in the works to really cover what our deployment is looking like within the state of Illinois. And that some of the numbers I reference are going to get updated. I think sometime this month is when those numbers are anticipated. So we'll sort of see how that solar deployment has been going since Siege's implementation. And since they last referenced a lot of these numbers a couple years back. So we should get updated numbers later on this month.
I have another question. So first of all, yeah, thank you for this great presentation. And sorry if you mentioned this already, but as I understand it, like the main focus for workforce development for IEC is, getting Siege up and running, getting all the hubs up ready, and then also utilizing federal funding more effectively. So that's already a lot of work, but I guess I'm curious if like there are any plans for like future kind of like legislation or like policy proposals for Illinois to continue to build on this, or if like these two kind of like focus areas are like really needing a lot more support before we can build on like the existing policy wins in CEJA.
Yeah, we're trying to expand all the work that we're doing within the clean energy sector, but also tackling issues such as transportation as an example. The Clean and Equitable Transportation Act is one that we're really pushing for within the state legislation for future years. Hopefully next year in this next legislative session, we'll be able to get a lot of progress made within those sectors to really address the diesel pollution that's coming from the trucking industry, from these medium and heavy size duty trucks, and really providing a path to electrification as we're building out the EV charging station infrastructure throughout the state of Illinois. The state of Illinois recently announced that they're awarding that they are announcing huge pools of money around, I think around like tens of millions of dollars to ensure that there's an EV charging station every 50 miles alongside the interstate. And then there's other initiatives as well that are really going into EVs, and so I think transportation is a big sector. We're still working on our grid, ensuring that we're having a strong grid as well. And working with counties and municipalities as well is always a big issue. Yeah, definitely. We'll send a follow-up email to everyone to ensure that everyone has the access to our YouTube, where we post a lot of our past webinars. Yeah, thank you all for coming.